Air Chief Marshal Zahir Ahmed Babar Sidhu Saab, Chief of Air Staff, Pakistan Air Force, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan Saab, President CAS, distinguished guests, eminent scholars, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning. It gives me immense pleasure to address the inaugural session of the Global Strategic Threat and Response 2022 International Conference, and I congratulate the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, CAS, for organizing this seminar. I must mention the fact that Pakistan Air Force has always been at the cutting edge, has produced heroes in the history of Pakistan. And I believe that Air Chief Marshal Saab, I have been impressed by his hard work and his understanding of modern technologies and his effort, because I believe change can only happen when you have humility in the fact that you know that knowledge is far beyond what I can access. And as long as your humility continues, you then become a sponge for accepting knowledge. So congratulations for the hard work put in by the Air Force, and I am sure we are confident that it will continue. Ladies and gentlemen, the best language for me to speak is Urdu, which is my mother tongue. But I have been informed that there are people on Zoom and on YouTube who may not understand the language. And since yesterday I was ensuring the fact that at least those people sitting here would have translation abilities, but today still, I think a time will come when automatically as I speak, the AI will translate my speech, but the time is still 5 years hence or 10 years hence. Until then, I will speak in English, and I hope I will be able to communicate my ideas. Now, I have been asked to speak on evolving global order, the threats and opportunities. And looking at that, I think this evolving global order looks at what progress mankind has achieved, and at the same time, looking at the mix of human emotions which analyzes that progress and then handles it and then becomes the decision maker as far as countries, nation states or civilizations are concerned. I will limit myself to 3 areas on which I will be able to express myself better. First is what has happened throughout human history, which prompt us to find a world order. We are learning from what has happened. And throughout human history, there are things which are constant. Human emotions, the human mind is a constant. It cannot be brought down to the simple mathematical 2 plus 2 is 4 or pure rational thinking. The second is, where are we today based on what we have done and whether it provides any lessons. So therefore, the third is, how can we have a better and safer tomorrow? That is where a new global order or an evolving global order will have to function. Looking back at human history, in a dialogue produced by Plato, Socrates had with Glaucon, that was his urge to establish a city-state. And he said that there are 2 essentials of a city-state. There is reason. The decisions are based on reason. That's what we are looking for in the world today. And that may lead to democracy or whatever form of government. The second is the desire, the needs coming out from within the body. And that's where trade comes in. That's where capitalism comes in. That's where human greed, if there is any, that comes in. And the third, therefore, Glaucon asked him, is that enough? So he said, no, that is not enough. That there is a thymos, the passion, the identity, the struggle for identity. It can be either a megalothymia, where a tyrant comes in, or an isothymia, where the feeling that I must be equal to my neighbor, or the feeling that I must be rewarded equally, or the feeling that all men are equal. There should not be any discrimination between races because of color, because of gender or anything. So, thymos was essential as far as he was concerned. Then comes along, in my thinking, in my research, then comes along Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun says that there is a cycle in how this takes place. There is an asabiya, the people who see a nation state and they feel that change has to happen. Maybe they are the nomads or those who dwell in the mountains, and they come down and they bring a change. And he called it a cyclic change. And I think he was not the first one to talk about cyclic change. I think Aristotle also believed in a cycle of satisfaction and dissatisfaction. Why this is necessary? All this, what I am talking to you about, is necessary because for any global order, it's a global order not between machines. It is a global order which affects humans. And unless the humans are satisfied, there will be no global order. And similarly, Kant also believed that history of humankind is a continuity of war and cruelty. But then there are people who came around which said that history is directional, history is not cyclic. Though human emotions are static, they change rarely, and the DNA takes a long time to change, 10,000 years maybe. So therefore, but there is a directional change. And of course, if I start making those people who forwarded capitalism, those people who forwarded the part of the new global order, which was liberalism, like Locke, Hegel, for example, Marx and communism, and Hobbes with his Leviathan, and Max Weber by his Protestant ethic and spirit of capitalism. There are possible readings, for example, how does this function? These economists believe that there is a continuous change which is happening, and therefore it will function on the two pillars, and one is rationalism and the other is the needs and wants, which establishes capitalism, and rationalism establishes democracy, and a liberal democracy. So the world order basically was a liberal democracy. But then comes along, and you have read most of these readings which I am talking about, the Samuel P. Huntington. Francis Fukuyama talks about that the end of history, but he was not the first to talk about the end of history. I think it was also mentioned by Hegel when at the Battle of Jena, that is the end of history. So Francis Fukuyama turns around and says that the end of history is there because democracy is there as a system of governance which can change depending on the country, and at the same time capitalism is there as trade and its benefit, the benefits of trade, and that's it. But then Samuel P. Huntington, and that's where the important thing is, when we talk about a changing global order, or when we talk about what happened in the past century, we must bring in the fact that there are civilizations, the momentum of civilizations, the momentum of identity, the momentum of, in Europe of a primordial identity, the fact that races, color of the skin, and civilizations matter, religions matter. So therefore, any new order will have to consider this in between. And what are the human emotions? And I believe very strongly the human emotions are of love. Remarkable. Every living person in the world would look at an innocent child and would have love for the child, or a beauty of a flower. That's the love which is there, undescribable. The love between man and woman, undescribable. It is run by our genes, it is run by our hormones, but it is there. So the biggest and the best human passion is love. And other than love, then there is hate. There are phobias, and there are battles, and there are wars. And the phobias have led to wars. What this country is doing, what this country is thinking, what is happening. The phobias have led to battles within families. When we don't understand what is happening, we mark it as a phobia, we mark it as an enemy. So love and therefore hate, and then hate leads to phobias. But there is also need, hunger, for example, that has to be satisfied. And somehow the phobias have to be handled with rationality. Either there are two possible approaches. One is to totally consider the human psyche as the driver of everything. And then you can pick up a Machiavellian approach, that this is human nature. Absorb that human nature entirely. Man may be evil, and therefore all your national workings have to be human greed, or all its evils can then help shape the future based on simple human nature. I remember reading a book by Robert Greene. I think it was 48 Laws of Power. And after reading the book, I wrote a book, and I took out that book in the last week or so, and I wrote a book that is on the book that is not for me. Why? In the 48 Laws of Power, he develops more on the Machiavellian situation and says that look at human nature, consider this as is, can't change, and then develop all systems upon it. However, one part of what happened over the last few years, I think very important as far as the global order is concerned, is the emergence of Europe, Renaissance. While the beauty of the Renaissance was in art and sculpture and the buildings of churches, and look, if you go to Europe, you can understand the beauty of the Renaissance and opening to knowledge. At the same time, there was a struggle, a primordial situation of war, primordial identity, where there were wars. And what led to the first global order are these wars. So therefore, some understanding and some mentioning of the wars is essential. There was a 100 years war or an 80 years war starting from 1340s, went into 1400s, and then there was a 30 years war, which started in 1618 and ended in 1648. Why was this war important? Europe had gone through many wars. Why was this war important? Because when it ended in the treaties of Westphalia. There were two treaties in Westphalia, and what was the determined world order then was recognition of nation states as inviolable as far as their borders were concerned. The first demarcation in history as far as nation states are concerned is the inviolability of the nation states. The second part of that treaty was that non-interference in another country, in the other nation state, the second most important thing. And looking at that, Kissinger also wrote in one of his books, I don't remember the title. Kissinger wrote that this Westphalian treaty was established without considering any other civilization. It was Europe deciding for the rest of the world. So that was the first, I think. But what also happened during the medieval era, which is very painful to mention, but it is there, it has happened. Despite all what was happening in Europe, at the same time there was colonization in the rest of the world, there was brutality, there was exploitation, and countries and regions have not forgotten that. For example, Africa. Africa is another region which is ready to rise, but it is deprived of health, education, and all opportunities, but it is exploited to the hilt. It is exploited as far as human resource is concerned, pure slavery, capturing humans, taking them to other continents. And then the European powers ruled on it. For example, in Congo, King Leopold II, it is considered that he was responsible for more than 1 million deaths, where if you did not meet your rubber quota, arms and legs were cut to give the tribes a signal that you have to meet them. So this kind of blatant brutality went around in the world. Colonialism in its raw form, and colonial exploitation, looting and plunder, and enriching prosperous countries in Europe, and making rest of the colonies in the world very poor. But also keep in mind, what was the laws written then? The laws were never the same for people. The savage people did not deserve any consideration, whether they were Red Indians or the savage people of Africa. Even Thomas Jefferson has talked about that, and he appreciated the fact when the Cherokee Nation was wiped out. that this is what had to be done to the savages. The savages never had any humanity-based understanding of laws. So that's another pain which exists throughout history of regions which have gone through that kind of exploitation. We still remember what happened in Indo-Pakistan subcontinent. People can point that out. So, looking at that era of the First World War, 40 million people dead, and of the Second World War, 85 million people dead, I think then came a movement which is very important, which brings us to today, and that is the battle between humanizing war or ending war. One of the humanists who looked at the fact that war must end, and I am a believer that war should end. You cannot humanize wars. But then was Tolstoy. I think at 22 he went into a war and he saw the misery of war. He saw the fact that one day when a ceasefire flag is waved up, people cease fighting among themselves and they sit down to pick up the dead and to pick up the wounded. And he thought the next day you're back on the ground with the same animosity, with the same evilness, killing people and destroying homes. So Tolstoy was one of the first few who talked about no war. Then, of course, he wrote Anna Karenina, you remember that. Then there was a movement which then started humanizing war. Henry Dunant, who got the first Nobel Peace Prize, he was a person who said that there must be civilized war. There must be rules to wars. And the peace movements also run by an Austrian lady by the name of Bertha Sittner. This peace movement said there must be an end to war. The day you humanize war, you permanently establish the fact that man will keep on fighting, and the stronger man will fight, and the weaker man will succumb. So, when the Nobel Committee wanted to give the first Nobel Peace Prize to Dunant, so the movement said that this is unfair. So another French person who was a pacifist was also given a Peace Prize at the same time, just to make sure that both concepts continue. And I must quote here, the first Sea Lord Admiral Fisher said that when you talk of humanizing war, you might as well think of humanizing hell also in the future. Now, after having said all this, where are we today? Because when we talk about tomorrow, we must understand what happened after the first global order, which I consider was Westphalia. I think after Westphalia, the world went through tremendous amount of killings. The First World War, the League of Nations happened, and then the Second World War. So, the United Nations was established in San Francisco in 1945. And I believe the devil was in the details. It was just nations who had come to victory, wrote down the laws for the new era. And one of the things which has come more crystallized much better today is the fact that I believe that the United Nations was there to ensure the fact that Europe does not go to war. You can practice your weaponry outside of Europe. You can go to Vietnam, you can go to the Philippines, you can go to Korea, you can go to Laos, Cambodia, and West is not concerned. There were areas of influence which were demarcated. Nations were divided, causing a 38th parallel in Korea. In Vietnam also, napalm was used. You remember My Lai and other atrocities. And keep in mind, what I am talking about are the rules were written, but surreptitiously, all rules were broken. So do you think that is what man is? Anything which he can do, hiding the fact, he will do. All rules of Geneva and all conventions of The Hague have been broken. Laws have been written. People have been made landless or identityless to be able to break the laws. So historically, Gulf of Tonkin, for example, today we read that it was not a real happening. It was created to create a war by responsible countries. You remember what brought it into focus, and what brought into focus brings out the fact which I want to talk about, what would be the importance of a new global order. What brought it out, for example, was that naked girl fleeing from Nepal. What brought about is Seymour Hersh's exposure of My Lai massacre. General Curtis, I have a statement written here in my notes, that General Curtis said, bomb them back into the Stone Age, which was similar to a dialogue which Pakistan heard in the early part of this century, that you can be bombed into the Stone Age. Remember that. So what's happening is happening again and again. It has not ended. I mentioned Philippines, Korea, Cambodia, Laos, the scorched earth policy, and then 9/11, which I very much empathize with the American people. Innocents were killed, and the reactions of 9/11. I do not want to ignore 9/11, neither the reactions of 9/11, whereby there was total devastation in that reaction west of Pakistan. So this is what has happened after the global order of the United Nations establishment in 1945. Then you can continue counting Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Libya. Democracy is fine, but if it gives a verdict against us, for example, in Algeria, it is not acceptable. So what is humanity being fed? Humanity is being fed vested interests, garbed, given the clothing of ideological interest. And I don't think man is ready to accept that continuously anymore. The massacre which happened and the world slept in Yugoslavia has been very painful for people who remember that. I believe Bush made a statement, I think it was the second Bush, who made a statement that there is no substitute for American leadership. It's a hubris which has to lead the way to some form of cooperation. And I still remember another statement where the UN Secretary General went to meet President Bush at Camp David, and Bush told him that it was important that we get full implementation of every United Nations resolution. Imagine a poor, newly born Pakistan trusting the newly formed United Nations with its resolutions, and we are still fighting for the implementation. And for his need, President Bush makes a statement that every United Nations resolution is important. So coming from there, ladies and gentlemen, I must talk about the dangers of today, because when you talk about the global order of tomorrow, you must understand the dangers of today. We have survived accidentally. Let me tell you that. There are numerous examples, at least 5 or 10 examples, where nuclear warfare was about to happen, and because of human error, and it stopped because of human interference. For example, the issue happened in the Cuban missile crisis, when in the Russian gunboat, before the captain fired missiles, he was stopped because that was a bad message. Similarly, in other areas, I can go into 5 detailed accidents where they were about to fire nuclear missiles. But then imagine the dangers today. At that time, there was a 20-minute or a 30-minute possibility or a window when a missile would be fired and a missile would hit, for thinking. With what was mentioned with the Air Chief Marshal Saab was hypersonic missiles. That window has shortened. For example, between India and Pakistan, recently a missile hit Pakistan. and within 2 minutes it hit Pakistan. Is that enough time? For example, imagine that was a very irresponsible thing that happened. India has yet to investigate that. India has yet to investigate nuclear uranium being sold in India. India has yet to investigate a lot of mistakes it has made in its nuclear program, whereby the world has been endangered. But I am just talking about the time difference between a time a missile is fired and a time the missile hits, a few minutes. So the world is really in danger, much more in danger than ever before. We have to consider that. Now, the Air Chief Marshal Saab mentioned cyber power, the ability to attack utilities, your finances, your defense, everything which runs on the internet, the ability to strike that and paralyze a country. That's a tremendous change which has happened, which has not been recognized. And I will tell you why not. Through DDoS, distributed service attacks. Imagine, you remember the Stuxnet monster, which increased the speed of the Irani centrifuges and affected them. So what I am saying is there is a fossilized old system which was established on the basis of power, focusing on the nation states. That power has been dissipated into other centers of power. That was a unique situation for 300 years, that the nation state wielded all the power, the nation state wielded the ability to pick armaments, citizens were not allowed to. That power has been challenged. Cryptocurrency, NFTs, AI-driven systems of war, which the Air Chief Marshal Saab talked about, the fact that artificial general intelligence is being sentient. For those of you who may not understand what sentient is, there was a Turing test. Alan Turing was a cyber code breaker. And there was a Turing test that the way you can differentiate between maturity of a computer and human is that there is a computer in one room and a human in another. And there's a human which is asking questions to the computer, and there's to the human itself. And the day they are not able to differentiate between the human and the computer, that is where AI will become sentient. Today, a Google employee put a blame on what was happening inside Google, that AI has become sentient. That's a danger which is separate. I'll talk to you about it. Because that will lead to the fact that the linkages between man and data and the cloud is still through what I write or what I speak. But a time is coming when that linkage may happen through the mind, and that will be the cyborg ability to be able to get that picture just by thinking of the process. There is too technical to be able to be speaking off here, but at least warning you that a time is coming like that also. And then people have warned about superintelligence emerging as a unitary form. That's a danger by itself. And I suggest to you the book by Superintelligence. I forget the name of the author, but I will, if I remember, I'll mention it to you. Even today, in the Air Force, for example, DARPA has made some defense advanced research projects agency has done research in which our AI pilots have defeated F-16 expert pilots. And that is not through a long period of training, but a small company by the name of Hansen defeated Lockheed in that, and 5 pilots were defeated by just simple AI pilots. So the world is, and no institution recognizes the changing world, that the power centers are changing. I will go on further with that. Warbots are in the picture, and the rules of the warbots being discussed and decided out within the countries is that you should kill only those I want you to kill. You should understand my intention and work creatively, autonomously. And the third is, you protect humans on my side. So the war will be licensed towards AI and robotics and wingmen and swarms of bots around the pilot, a single pilot. This is something which you will understand, Chief Marshal Sir. more than others. So, what is the world demanding? The world is demanding a one world solution. The world is not demanding a nation state solution. Nation states are being challenged by multinational global players for the last 50, 60 years also. Not in the last 20, much more in the last 20. How? Because democracies have been undermined or overwhelmed by oil interest, pharma interest, undermined also. You can look at the history of any country where decisions are made based on vested interest of power lobbies. So, humanity is also demanding emancipation. There should be a difference. Why is that the rules of my country apply on my citizens, but for the rest of the citizens of the world, I have evil rules? Can't happen like that. You can't isolate, disenfranchise people from their humanity, for example. I think the name of the American lawyer was Yu, who established the fact that in Guantanamo Bay, you can the law should be there for terrorists also. I am not saying that law should not be there, but the laws should be what can be applied to everybody rather than a separate law for savages. So, humanity is demanding emancipation. Emancipation. You have to reconsider the refugee issue. The world has to reconsider humanity as an issue rather than refugees based on color and skin. Pakistan has been a giant in the world as far as morality is concerned. We have had 4 million refugees for 40 years. While countries were not accepting refugees, I wish the refugees of Ukraine are being treated well, and I wish all refugees in the world should have been treated like that. And I made a statement on Twitter when I said that I just read that 2 cruise ships have been hired to handle refugees, and I said if that is made a compulsion, I think one way of reducing wars is making sure that all refugees go into cruise ships, or they be given such a treatment. So, what is COVID showed the lack of emancipation as far as global health is concerned. The rich countries better than the poor countries. Of course, some vaccines went there, but that was again a challenge to our psyche, to our thinking that we are human, and that is where it should come about. There's an emerging China, which we've talked about, and it's like the new Athens in the Thucydides trap, that Sparta was the established power, and then as Athens came up, the Athens was attacked to limit its power. Now, how can we have a safer and better tomorrow? Now, that's the last part of my speech, and it's short. I must quote you Alice in Wonderland. The Cheshire cat says to Alice, if you don't know where you are going, any road will get you there. We should stop repeating our mistakes. We should stop redoing what we have done before. We should stop looking at the last century where millions and millions and millions of people died. To humanizing war, to ensure that war continues, to establishing robots, identifying a person. You see, assassination internationally was condemned even by the United States when Israel was targeting Palestinians, calling targeted assassinations. It was George Bush who said that this is illegal in the laws of the world, that you identify somebody, target and kill. But the same thing has been adopted. So that means the laws of the world will change around according to what I want to do. That's a dangerous trend. Unless man grapples that, there is going to be no new world order, just a mixing and matching of things, what are necessary today, and running towards looking at the trees rather than the entire forest. So for a new world order, we must recognize a multivalent world. These are a few things which I must bring to you. With multiple centers of progress, must recognize this. For a new world order, we must accept its complexities, religions, castes, and cultures. We must devise new ways of working on emerging issues. We must change our priorities, ladies and gentlemen. That's the most important part. Securing our borders, securing our resources is fine. But beyond that, exploiting other borders, other resources, oil is a priority, therefore we can go to wars, should not happen. You know how much money was spent in, and I don't trust think tanks anymore. Why? Sorry to say it to all of you here who are part of some think tank. Why? Because these are the think tanks which came up with the policy of mutually assured destruction. Do you remember that? If 10% of the people of my country are destroyed, we are going to destroy 50% of theirs. If they then come back and hit 60% of ours, we are going to go back and hit. So what's the satisfaction when I am dead and majority of our people dead to ensure that everybody is dead? Is that mutually assured destruction? That's the policy which countries believed in. So we need a different anchor to consider these policies. We need a different anchor. Only securing our own people is not the logic which can lead to a future world. How much money was spent? I was trying to calculate yesterday, looking at whatever sources were available. In the 30,000 or more nuclear weapons the United States accumulated, they spent close to $6 trillion. Imagine the Soviet Union must have spent another $6 trillion. Imagine what could have done to human needs of hunger, of starvation, of health. Even $1 trillion would have changed the world. So we must change our priorities, ladies and gentlemen, here, starting from here. Then there's a big issue of global warming. So we must encourage environmental paradigm shift. That is what the world is demanding. The earth is demanding a one world solution. So embrace people, even migration with protection. How can you have colonially destroyed countries or anybody and resist human migration? Ensure your protection, but welcome people. Unless people are emancipated in the world, it does not come to one world. It will keep on in conflicts. Invite innovation and nurture global leadership. And then my most favorite part is Rumi. I've been talking about the needs of Pakistan, and I want to tell you the need of Rumi. Rumi said, the first thing, he has 8 stages of love as a solution to mankind's animosity and wars, etc. Love yourself, clean the heart, clean the mirror of your heart so you understand. Then love your family, the second part, goes beyond, give hope to your own children within your family, love to your own children, love your neighbors, then love your nation. It's important to love your nation, but then does not have a writing on the margin that you hate other countries. Love your nation and love humanity. The wars today are basically, we do not consider humanity as our equals. There are savages which have to be treated differently. Then furthermore, his 6th pillar is very important, and it looks at global warming today. He says that you love the earth, both the inanimate and the animate, the clouds, the water, what the earth is begging from humanity. So you love the earth and love the prophet, and by far then you love your creator. So a new global order, which I am saying, as different from the testosterone-based world order which we have lived until today, is humanity, equality of men, of course of women, then health, second, but part of the same humanity, equality for all, then health, education, and food for all. Important. That should be the goal of the world order, not just the fact that temporarily let us live in peace. The second is a world order based on morality. But what is morality? Morality will always have a question mark. So I thought about it yesterday, and then I have a suggestion that all laws, when cleansed of vested interest, becomes a morality by itself. It does not have to be a religious morality. It has to be laws of the world cleansed of vested interest. That's the second pillar. The third is environment. It's begging for the world to come together, and that should be a priority of the new world order. The fourth is recognize the new power bases and restrain the harmful effects, which Chief Saab also mentioned. We do not understand the new power bases, meta, cyber, data, the ability to influence the information coming to you. It's gone beyond the nation states. It's gone beyond the United Nations. It does not understand. It's the United Nations and it can modify, but it is today fossilized in the sense that if it does not recognize new centers of power, it cannot do much in the future. So, the fifth is control emerging weapon technology, which is a must. What was talked about. It is dangerous. It is going to hit people individually, and there is no human war. The sixth pillar, which I want to say, is that no wars as different from human wars. Peace is not only the absence of war, but an absence of issues of conflict. So, ladies and gentlemen, the world is demanding a new global order, not based on what is dictated, not based on phobias which are generated in every generation, not based on the fact that every generation unlearns what the previous generation has learned, but a future of the world. And in the end, let me quote people who have really thought about the fact that the human race, having spent 10,000 years of history, is under serious danger. The DNA-based human race, the carbon-based human race may give way to the silicon-based future, and none other than Yuval Noah Harari has talked about it. Stephen Hawking in his last book has talked about the danger, and they are predicting the fact that we have been saved from nuclear accidents just by accident itself. We may not be saved by accidents in the future if mankind continues in this path. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Pakistan, Paindabad.